The speakers for the General Assembly of New Zealand attempted to open Parliament on schedule in 1862, only to be met with a problem. There were not sufficient members of the Legislative Council or the House of Representatives to achieve quorum. The reason was uncertain, but news soon came. The members from the north had been shipwrecked.
Hello, and welcome to the Shipwreck Archive.
Thank you. Would you happen to have the White Swan's wrecked Parliament?
Here we are. Enjoy!
The New Zealand Parliament was intended to open on the 26th of June, 1862. Wellington had been trying to convince the Parliament to move from Auckland to Wellington for a long time, and had even built them parliamentary buildings. In the face of this, and protests from the southern members of Parliament that Wellington was a more central location, while Auckland favored the northern members, it was agreed to give Wellington a chance. The Parliamentary session was postponed to the 30th of June, and then to July 7th, and members still failed to arrive in Wellington. The attempt to open the Parliament on the 7th was a lonely one for the speakers. In Legislative Council, there were only 3 members present, in addition to the Speaker. In the House of Representatives, there were only 9 members, in addition to the Speaker. It was clear that nothing was going to be able to get done until further ships arrived. It was decided to wait until the next day, in the hopes that steamers from the north and south would arrive with the missing members. The afternoon of the next day did bring some additional people. The Lord Worsley steamed in carrying the members from Southland, Otago, and Canterbury. Almost at the same time that it was looking as though the Parliament would be able to open soon, news came from the east coast that the White Swan had wrecked about 60 miles from her destination, and on board of her had been all of the members from the north. Since the White Swan was coming from Auckland, on board of her were also documents and books that were used by Parliament, and Premier Fox. There was no chance of opening Parliament in the next few days. To make things worse, news came that the ship was carrying Governor Grey had been blown off course by a storm and was closer to the Chatham Islands than Wellington. Once again, the opening of Parliament was delayed. The White Swan was described as a fast and comfortable ship. The 335-ton steamer had been built in 1853, and in 1858, at a time when steamships were still considered a bit of an oddity, she had been chartered by the New Zealand government to carry mail between major cities. It was the mail that would initially delay her departure. Though she was carrying many passengers and important documents, her main role was as the mail ship. When the mail was delayed, so was she. The passengers expected her to depart the next day, but when they went to board, they found a card posted that the ship was not able to depart due to the fog. Member of the House of Representatives, Robert Graham, would later write to the Wellington Independent newspaper that he suspected that the real reason for the delay in their departure was that one of the compartments of the ship was flooded, and that the crew spent the day trying to pump her out. Once they had reduced the water, they looked over her and found that a suction pipe that fed the boiler had been turned onto the fore compartment by mistake, and that was the reason for the flooding. There was nothing structurally wrong with the ship, and the morning of the next day, the passengers were allowed to board the ship. 2 days later, the White Swan arrived in Napier, having only met with good weather and favorable winds. They took on 10 more passengers, and they departed in the afternoon of the same day. With continued good weather, and the ship traveling around 10 knots, though they had been delayed, it was still hoped that they would arrive in Wellington Sunday morning, still with enough time for Parliament to open as scheduled that Monday. On Sunday, around 6 in the morning, those who were not already awake on board of the steamer were jolted awake, though the shock was a quick one that shuddered the boat. One man on board asked if the ship had struck something, but another passenger assured him it was only the sea. Some other passengers voiced their opinion that it was an earthquake, but since the ship continued to sail almost 5 minutes, it was assumed by the passengers that whatever had occurred was not a danger to the ship. They were therefore shocked when the steward of the ship came down into the cabin and asked in a very calm manner that all the passengers should assemble on deck. The evacuation from the cabin was described as rushed but not panicked. The calm manner of the steward seems to have had an effect, though many of the people who came onto the deck were only half dressed in their rush to see what had happened. At first, Captain Alan Harper, who was in command of the White Swan, believed that he had struck a log or a piece of wreckage that had not impacted his ship, but news soon came out that the forehold was already nearly full of water. The first knowledge that Captain Harper and his crew had of the true nature of the accident was when they found that the water was already up to the men's beds in the forecastle. It was quickly realized by the crew that what they had supposed to be a harmless bump had in fact been a rock that the ship had glanced off of, but the White Swan was sinking. Captain Harper immediately ordered the ship be turned towards the shore where they could ground her. They were only 1.5 miles from shore, a trip that only took them about 1/4 of an hour, but tension was high on the deck until they did beach the ship. That the shore was so close to start with would later be pointed out by one of the passengers, who would say that the ship was at least 5 miles out of her normal course when she struck the rock. Once the ship was grounded, they still needed to lower the ship's boats to get the passengers, their luggage, and the mail to shore, which was about 100 yards distance. This was also delayed since it was found that the 4 boats on the ship were all in need of some care before launching them. A reporter for the New Zealander happened to be on board the White Swan, and he was of the opinion that such deficits were often the case. None of the boats had rowlocks, which was a problem eventually solved by cutting up a broom and several walking sticks. The boats were still short on oars, which was not easy to solve. Corks also had to be found to serve as plugs for the lifeboat. There was concern about launching the boats with all the passengers without finding a safe place to land first, however. So Robert Graham, Captain Butler, also a member of the House of Representatives, the first mate, and 2 sailors volunteered to search for an opening in the surf. While the scouting party was gone, things were tense on the ship. Though the ship had been grounded, it bumped and rolled side to side with the waves. The people on board of her became concerned that she was going to tip over on her side and the waves would sweep her decks. The scouting party soon returned, though, and brought news of a safe landing place nearby. They then took an anvil and attached a rope to it. The boat once more departed, this time tying the rope to a log on shore. Ship's boats would take this rope on board, and they were then hauled through the surf to the shore safely, thus making up for a lack of oars. By around 8 that morning, all of the passengers were on shore, between 50 and 65 in number depending on the source. Most of the passengers had not even had to get wet. The mail was brought on shore still safe and dry. They then started to save the luggage and the items that could be salvaged from the ship's cabins. The steward also intervened, and a large quantity of food and bedding were brought to shore as well. The same could not be said for the important government papers and books that the White Swan had been carrying. These had been in the forehold, and therefore were more difficult to reach because of the flooding. Premier Fox offered a reward of £150 for their safe landing, and so the crew decided to make the attempt, however. The crew did manage to get the papers up onto the deck, but then found themselves at an impasse. The weight of the documents was too much for the small ship's boats, so they had no way to bring them to shore. Instead, they simply shoved the crates overboard, in the hopes that they would float to shore. This was done without accounting for tides or winds, however, and the last of the crates were seen was being carried off to sea by the waves. In an attempt to save them, Premier Fox nearly upset the boat he was in and was forced to give up. One crate that had the Postmaster General's records did eventually reach the shore, but it was unique in this. Most of the passengers who had stored their luggage in cabins had all of their belongings brought to shore, but people like Captain Butler, who had stored their items in the hold of the ship, found that they had lost everything they had carried on board. Captain Harper would be the largest individual loser on the ship, having lost personal goods in the amount of 150 pounds. For the entire time that the passengers were being ferried to the shore, and for the time that the crew was trying to save the luggage and other goods from the ship, the engineer kept the engines going. Not only was the force of the screw needed to keep the ship above the water, since if she slid back she would sink, but it also kept the ship's pumps going, helping the ship stay free of water as much as possible. Since the coal supply was underwater, the engine crew was forced to burn whatever else was possible, including fatty legs of mutton. They would keep the engine going until the water had risen enough that the fires in the engine were put out and they were forced to retreat. People who knew the area knew that they were on the land of a Mr. John Moore, who lived about 4 miles away, and that they were about 15 to 20 miles south of Castle Point. Graham and another passenger named Duncan therefore immediately set out to go make Mr. Moore aware of what had occurred, and see if they could get any help. Though he did not go into any particulars about their journey to see Moore, Graham would later describe the journey as terrible, in part because both men were already very tired from the morning's activities. While they headed out to find help, the passengers did what they could to make themselves comfortable. Moore's woolshed, a large corrugated iron structure about 3/4 of a mile from the wreck, proved a welcome structure, and thanks to driftwood washing onto the shore, they were able to light a fire quickly and make themselves breakfast. There was coffee, bread, and cheese. The only complaint that the reporter of the New Zealander had was that there was no cream or sugar for the coffee. Passengers' talk quickly turned to the many ways in which this situation could have been worse. The ship could have struck her engine compartment, which would have sank her immediately, and was a difference of only a few feet. She could have struck earlier in the morning when it was dark, which would have added confusion and more people asleep into the mix. Surely a recipe for disaster. She could have wrecked at any other point along the coast. Most of the coastline around them would have made it almost impossible for them to run ashore. The nearest boat landing was 30 miles away. In all, the passengers and crew ate their breakfast feeling lucky. It was with this feeling that they decided to have a Sunday service held in the woolshed and read by the Chief Justice Arney, who had been a passenger on board. It was during this time that Graham and Duncan returned, horses and a bullock dray in tow. Still not able to rest, Graham and Duncan departed around 1 that afternoon, guided by Moore's son and on horses furnished by Moore, in order to raise the alarm and to try to intercept Lord Worsley in Wellington and have her effect a rescue. In case this did not work, however, letters were also dispatched to Castle Point in the hopes that these would find the steamer, the Stormbird, which was expected there on Tuesday. As soon as Graham and Duncan had left, Moore began to throw himself into offering what comfort he could for the people who remained. There were 5 female passengers, and these he took to his house to be his guests. With them also came some of the male passengers, meaning that the Moore family suddenly had around 15 unexpected and sudden houseguests. The rest of the passengers were forced to make themselves comfortable in the woolshed and around the nearby cook fire. 20 mattresses had been rescued from the wreck and some blankets, but for the most part, people were forced to sleep on the ground the best they could. Moore brought all of their luggage and provisions they had rescued into the shed using his wagon, and so there was not enough room for everyone in the shed, even sleeping side by side, and many were forced to sleep around the fire instead. Though the passengers seem to have, for the most part, thought of the whole thing as an entertaining adventure, it did not make them any less eager to leave the shore behind. They erected a lantern on a flagpole, and a blue light was arranged in the hopes that they would catch the attention of any passing ship. The passengers and crew near the wreck woke up the next morning to find the White Swan was in far worse condition than when they had gone to sleep. The winds had been strong that night, and they had heard the crashing waves, but they did not realize until the next morning that these waves had carried with them the masts, funnels, hatches, and most of the deck. The wreck now lay broadside, with pieces of wreckage washing ashore on every wave. These waves did bring with them luxuries, and the people on the beach breakfasted on eggs, ham, butter and bread, and champagne. Some people that night swore they had seen a ship, but it was dark, and no one could be certain if what they had really seen was actually the light of a ship or the reflection of a star. Tuesday brought a drizzle, but no sign of the storm bird, and there was news that Graham and company had been seen by some travelers, and they were not traveling at a rate that was likely to get them to Wellington in time to meet with the Lord Worsley. There was talk from the people in the camp of beginning the trek themselves toward Wellington, but they were discouraged by the people who were familiar with the roads, and who said that it was an almost impossible journey on foot. At least where they were comfortable, and had plenty of food still washing ashore. It was with great relief, therefore, that on Wednesday morning, the storm bird approached and launched a boat towards the shore. It turned out that their letters had never reached her at Castle Point because the high winds and rough waves had discouraged the attempt. She had also been the light they had seen on Monday night, but though she had seen their light and been curious about it, the high winds had also discouraged an investigation. It was only when she reached Wellington on Tuesday afternoon that she had heard the news of the wreck from Graham and Duncan, who had arrived 2 hours before her. She had immediately turned around, only pausing to take on coal, and by 1:30 on Wednesday afternoon everyone was on board of her, with what had been saved from the White Swan, and they were finally headed to Wellington. They would arrive at 2 o'clock on the morning of Thursday. It would come out, once everyone was on shore, that not only was the ship 5 miles off of her route when she had wrecked, but there had also been no watch kept on the deck at the time. Indeed, one of the passengers who had come on deck right before the accident had called out to the man at the wheel what a dangerous position the ship was in. It was admitted that the wind was blowing strong, but it was a clear and bright morning. It was judged that there was no reason for the ship to have struck a rock in such conditions, except through negligence of the captain. Captain Harper appealed this decision, but little came of it. The passengers might not have thought very well of Captain Harper by the end of the trip, but they had nothing but the best to say about the stewards and ship's cooks, for whom they raised a monetary reward for. The stewards and cooks had made every effort to make the meals and stay on shore as comfortable as possible, going so far as to go to Moore and beg for some flour and sugar, which was provided. As for Moore, Parliament opened finally on the 14th of July, 1862, with a special mentioning in the opening speech to his kindness and hospitality to the members of Parliament who had washed up near his woolshed. The documents were never recovered, and were presumed to have been destroyed on the rocks during the high winds. Their loss would be felt. Parliament would spend the next 2 years meeting in Auckland before formally moving to Wellington in 1865. For House of Representative members Captain Butler and Robert Graham, the eventful year was not over. They would be wrecked on the 31st of August, 1862, for a second time. This time on the Lord Worsley. But that perhaps is a story for another time.
For more information, please see the further account of the wreck of the SS White Swan from the New Zealander from July 16, 1862, or see our other sources in the description below.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for visiting the Shipwreck Archives. See you soon.